Kupiansk strike against Putin. How Generals Drapatyi and Khartia outsmarted the Russian dictator. Ukrainian drones are paralyzing oil refineries in Russia. Powerful explosions are rocking Saratov and Engels. He overdid it and got slapped on the wrist. U.S. Army Secretary Driscoll has been removed from negotiations on Ukraine. Trump is ready to provide security guarantees to Ukraine, but only on the condition that the armed forces of Ukraine withdraw from Donbas. How did Zelensky respond to this? And why is Erdoğan announcing that peace is just around the corner? The political pendulum has swung in the United States. Republican Congressman Thomas Massie has introduced a high-profile bill on NATO. Hello, my name is Karina Klishin, and right now, here are the top stories. But first, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose touch with you. Across the vastness of YouTube. Another hot night in Russia? On December 13th, the carpet plan was implemented at the airports of 3 Russian cities. In Saratov, Penza, and Cheboksary. In Saratov and Engels, air defense systems were actively operating. Locals heard a series of explosions. Let me remind you that Engels 2, which is located near the city of Engels, is one of the airfields where strategic aviation aircraft are based, launching Kh-101 cruise missiles at Ukraine. Drones also attacked an oil refinery in Saratov, Russia. The Saratov oil refinery is part of the Rosneft structure. Its design capacity is about 7 million tons of oil per year. As a result, a fire broke out there. Powerful explosions also thundered in temporarily occupied Berdyansk. Several explosions were recorded in the area of the gas distribution station. Local residents report on social media that the explosion at the gas distribution station happened due to safety violations while trying to eliminate the consequences of the strike. What do you think? Did the occupiers smoke in the wrong place again? Reading the comments under previous episodes, I see that many of our viewers are from Kazakhstan, Moldova, Europe, and even the USA. We Ukrainians are very grateful for your support and proud to have such reasonable viewers. Let us know in the comments under this episode as well which country you're watching us from and whether people there support our fight against the empire of evil. I always enjoy reading your comments. And now let's continue. Things are about to get even more interesting. Russian troops surrounded in the northwestern part of Kupiansk are under Ukrainian control. Yesterday, the defense forces reported a lightning counterattack in the Kharkiv region. Thank you. Details of the successful operation are coming up in the report.
Putin invited journalists to Kupiansk, but it was Zelensky who showed up.
Today, the Kupiansk direction. Our soldiers here are achieving results for Ukraine.
Despite the statement of the Kremlin dictator, Kupiansk remains under Ukrainian control, and our military continues to drive the occupiers out of the city. As a result of a successful operation, Ukraine's defense forces have secured the entire northwestern outskirts of the city. Thank you. They managed to clear the area of Russians.
The enemy was completely cleared from the northwestern outskirts. That is, those groups that infiltrated the wooded area, whose task was to locate our artillery, find our launch positions, and take control of logistics, were destroyed by the defense forces.
According to Khartia, the remaining enemy forces in Kupiansk have been surrounded. We're talking about 200 occupiers. In
the course of the fighting, Kondrashivka, Radkivka, and their surroundings were liberated, as well as several districts in the north of Kupiansk. And
now the main thing, how the armed forces of Ukraine managed to carry out a successful operation. Yuri Fedorenko, commander of the Achilles Regiment, whose unit carries out combat missions in the Kupiansk area, says that the operation lasted for half a year. At first, our soldiers stopped the enemy's advance in this direction and then began to push Russian forces back.
The Kupiansk campaign has been going on for more than a year now. And we have to state that a little over 6 months ago, the enemy achieved partial success. They managed to reach the northern outskirts of Kupiansk, flank the city, infiltrate the forested area on the northwestern edge of Kupiansk, and even infiltrate the city itself. Importantly, not a single district or neighborhood on the right bank of Kupiansk. The enemy never managed to take full control, but did infiltrate a significant number of their personnel and sabotage reconnaissance groups. At the same time, the enemy was actively pressing on the left bank bridgehead. The enemy was tasked with capturing Kupiansk left bank and Kupiansk Uzlovoy by November 1st, 2024. However, the actions of the enemy are being actively repelled on the left bank bridgehead by various military formations of the armed forces of Ukraine, the defense forces as a whole, and special forces units.
The Russians in the Kupiansk area really kept up constant pressure to get into the city. The occupiers even used a gas pipeline. In Russia, they believe so much that this pressure would be enough that they ended up deceiving themselves. And in the Kremlin, it happened again for the third time in 3 days.
The Zapad group announced they had liberated the city of Kupiansk.
So that's it, it's all over, completely finished.
This means the city is definitely under our control.
But let's return to the efforts of the Ukrainian defenders. The defense forces of Ukraine managed to turn the situation in their favor. This was achieved in part by cutting off the enemy's logistics. As a result, according to military political expert and territorial defense forces serviceman Oleksandr Musyenko, the occupiers were left without reserves.
The Russians tried to set up crossings over the Oskil River in various areas, but Ukrainian units destroyed them. This prevented the occupiers from advancing from the east. The enemy tried to restore them and had some successes, but then it was cut off again.
Fedorenko also confirms that the occupiers' routes across the Oskil River were cut.
Logistical support for those among the enemy who were and remain in Kupiansk began to be carried out by the enemy through the use of their drones.
In turn, the enemy systematically attempted to destroy our logistics along this direction.
This is a very difficult challenge for the defense forces because in order to supply their group of troops, the defense forces need to ensure logistics, deliver ammunition, deliver provisions, carry out medical evacuation, and perform all activities related to holding combat positions and providing logistical support for the bridgeheads. At present, there are a certain number of crossings. I won't specify the number. From the right to the left bank, they are constantly attacked by the enemy. There are days when up to 50 guided aerial bombs hit the area of the crossings, in addition to enemy strike wings, fiber optic drones, and the enemy also uses missile weapons. In this case, it is especially important to highlight the work of the engineering troops and other structural units of the defense forces, who are tasked with guarding, defending these same crossings, and restoring them after the enemy delivers massive fire strikes.
The operation continues as Russian troops are still present in the central part of the city. The defense forces locate and eliminate them. Russians incur heavy losses in this direction due to coordinated efforts. Second Corps of Ukraine's National Guard Khartia with units of the Armed Forces, Main Intelligence Directorate, Special Operations Forces, Security Service, Alpha, CORD, Military Law Enforcement and Tactical Group Kupiansk.
In total, from September 22nd to December 12th, 1,027 Russian servicemen have been eliminated. 291 wounded, 13 taken prisoner. More than 200 occupiers have been cordoned off in the city. All their attempts to break through the defense are repelled. Kupiansk is under fire control of the defense forces. The enemy's ground access is completely blocked.
The operation was carried out under the direct control of the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Syrsky, and the commander of the NGO, Pivnenko. At the same time, Nikolaevsky Vanek and Radio Liberty journalist Yegor Loginov write that the Kupin operation was conceived, planned and executed by the commander of the Joint Forces Group, Major General General Drapatyi.
Without additional reserves, existing forces and resources, against an opponent superior in almost every component. Drapatyi, who in May 2024 was urgently transferred to the Kharkiv region to stop the Russian army's breakthrough from the direction of Vovchansk. And he stopped it. He was the one who led the liberation of Kherson region in 2022. And
one more curious detail, or rather a reason for Russian propagandists to throw a fit. When Zelensky visited Ukrainian troops in the Kupiansk direction, he was just over a kilometer from Russian positions and 500 meters from the gray zone where fighting is still ongoing.
what is the security situation like there? So that everyone understands what steps the president is taking to demonstrate to the whole world and to our strategic partners. In particular to the United States of America, the achievements of his people and the Ukrainian army. The area, you saw the protective nets in the president's address, is being actively shelled by enemy drones using fiber optics, which cannot be jammed by electronic warfare. Some types of enemy rocket and self-propelled artillery are also able to reach it. In other words, this is the Supreme Commander-in-Chief's absolute trust in the defense forces, and the tremendous ability of the defense forces to provide the president with the opportunity to show the world the real situation.
So once again, the Ukrainian defense forces have reduced the Kremlin's media pressure to zero, exposing Putin, either as a liar or a fool.
As for me, I never cease to admire the courage and heroism of Ukrainian soldiers. They are holding the front and standing up to a huge horde that vastly outnumbers them. That's why I urge you to support the armed forces of Ukraine, and if you can't do so financially, write them words of encouragement in the comments. And while debates about a peace agreement are still ongoing, here are a few more specifics and security guarantees for Ukraine. In Germany, a defense group is being prepared to ensure security. This was announced by President Zelensky himself.
A defense group is being prepared in Germany focused on the details of security guarantees for Ukraine. On the Ukrainian side, the group is headed by Lieutenant General Hanatov. Representatives of our army, intelligence services, and security forces are participating.
At the same time, there is a group working in the American direction, dealing with the economy, recovery, and investments. Zelensky emphasized that Ukrainian officials are working on this side, led by Prime Minister Yulia Sviridenko, Deputy Prime Minister Taras Kashka, and Minister Oleksiy Sobolev.
The Trump administration will provide Ukraine with security guarantees based on NATO Article 5 if the armed forces of Ukraine withdraw from Donbas. And,
by the way, about the states, Axios has published a piece that I am convinced will, to put it mildly, surprise you. And first and foremost, it will surprise Ukrainian military personnel. Ukraine has submitted its own version of a peace plan to Washington, in which it rejects both the withdrawal of troops from Donbas and renouncing NATO membership. This is reported by the New York Times. According to the publication, Zelensky's plan was prepared after consultations with European leaders. Ukraine has removed from Trump's original version of the plan those points it considers its red lines. In particular, Kyiv insists on retaining control over the eastern territories and refuses to abandon its course toward NATO membership. The publication notes that such conditions are unlikely to satisfy Russia. According to another publication, the Wall Street Journal, Trump's special representative Steve Witkoff will hold a decisive meeting with Zelensky and European leaders this weekend.
this meeting is of critical importance as the White House is seeking to reach an agreement to end the war with Russia by the end of the year. At the same time,
sources from the publication report that there are still serious disagreements in the proposed peace plan. First and foremost, they concern the issue of territory, which remains one of the most difficult topics in the negotiations. And by the way, about the negotiation process itself. So, as expected, the Kremlin has criticized the idea of a ceasefire. Putin's spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, stated that a ceasefire in Ukraine would be a deception and a way to cloud people's minds, and that what is needed is a long-term peace. It's strange to hear Russia talk about peace after yet another round of shelling, but lying is normal for them.
peace in Ukraine must be secured with reliable guarantees. And if Ukraine needs a ceasefire to hold a territorial referendum, then under such a pretext, it won't happen. Dmitry Peskov, press secretary to the president of Russia.
It's strange to hear this from Russians, knowing their fondness for referendums, or rather illegal referendums, on the territory of another sovereign state. But while Russia is spouting more nonsense, something more interesting is happening in the States. US Army Minister Driscoll has been removed from negotiations on Ukraine. This was reported by The Telegraph. According to journalists, Driscoll was removed from the talks by the increasingly paranoid Defense Minister Hexed. This was done after the army minister overstepped his authority during the negotiations. He tried too hard and they slapped his wrists for it. The article doesn't provide any more specific statements, but it's already clear that things aren't going so smoothly on the American side when it comes to the negotiations and the peace plan. Meanwhile, for the first time since the start of the full-scale invasion, Russia attacked Odesa with Kinzhal missiles. On the night of December 13th, the port city came under a massive combined attack by the enemy. The Russians struck Odesa and the region with drones and ballistic missiles. Most of the city lost power. There were also problems with the water supply. Authorities report damage to civilian facilities as well as energy and industrial infrastructure. Earlier on December 12th, as a result of a Russian attack on the port of Chornomorsk, a vessel belonging to a Turkish company was damaged. A statement from the ministry. And this year in Kyiv as well, Ankara regards such an attack as proof that the war is spreading beyond land and threatens the safety of shipping throughout the entire region. At the same time, as reported by the Turkish state agency Anadolu, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan, during a meeting with Putin, called on the Russian dictator to agree to a limited ceasefire.
He noted that implementing a limited ceasefire primarily aimed at energy facilities and ports could be beneficial.
Erdoğan also stated that he discussed Russia's war against Ukraine with the dictator Putin, and in particular the contribution that Turkey can make to peace efforts. According to him, both Moscow and Ankara view the dialogue initiated by Trump positively. Additionally, according to Erdoğan, the Black Sea should not be seen as a battlefield because this would harm both Russia and Ukraine and would in no way benefit them. And after meeting with the Russian leader, Erdoğan stated that peace is not far off. The Turkish leader said this to journalists on the plane returning to Turkey after his visit to Ashgabat.
Peace is not far off, we can see that. All we need to do is get back on the path where peace lies.
I wonder if Russia will now stop striking the ports. And what do you think? Why is Erdoğan so confident that peace is near? A former Trump advisor is helping Russia's Lukoil with the sale of its international assets. This is reported by Politico. The Russian oil giant Lukoil, which is under US sanctions, has hired Brian Lanza to oversee media relations during Donald Trump's election campaigns to help find a buyer for its international assets. Lanza and his firm started working for Lukoil in the past few weeks and have already achieved results. They managed to get the US Treasury to extend the deadline for selling the assets from December 13th to January 17th. The publication writes that Lanza does not have to register as a foreign agent because the work of a consultant for the company's international division is not considered political activity or in the interests of a foreign state. Lanza himself declined to comment on the information. Lukoil and the company also did not respond to the publication's inquiries. I'm curious what you think about this information. Write your thoughts, don't hold back in the comments. Trump's new strategy involves dividing spheres of influence instead of the traditional US approach of containing China and Russia. Axios reports this. As the publication notes, in the new national security strategy, the White House states that the affairs of other countries concern Washington only if there is a direct threat to US interests. The Trump administration has already begun a policy of easing toward Beijing and has allowed the export of NVIDIA chips to maintain leadership in the field of artificial intelligence. A similar shift is being observed with regard to Russia, where American representatives will confirm they are pushing Ukraine to hand over the entire Donbas to Moscow in exchange for resuming large-scale partnerships in energy and resource extraction. At the same time, Trump openly calls the European Union a decaying project and expresses his willingness to recognize other countries' spheres of influence in exchange for stability and America's dominance in the Western Hemisphere. Despite all this, Trump is calling for Russia to be brought back into the G7, from which it was expelled precisely for the invasion of Crimea in 2014. And the new U.S. national security strategy published by the White House has become more friendly toward Russia than
steadily moving in the direction of Europe. What are your comprehensive thoughts and considered opinions regarding a particular concept, an innovative idea, or a complex situation that we have been discussing in depth, or perhaps one that we are about to introduce for your careful consideration and evaluation?
New Trump strategy. Write your thoughts in the comments.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
In the US, the political pendulum has swung once again. Republican Congressman Thomas Massie has decided to shake up the media landscape. He has introduced a bill for the United States to withdraw from NATO. According to him, the alliance is a relic of the Cold War. And money should be spent not on allies, but on the country's own borders. What is behind this initiative and what are the chances it will become a reality? Let's break it down.
A member of the U.S. House of Representatives, Republican Thomas Massie, has introduced a bill for the United States to withdraw from NATO. This became known from the text of the bill, which Massie published on the social network X.
NATO is a relic of the Cold War. The United States should withdraw from NATO and use that money to defend our own country, not socialist countries. Today I introduce Bill H.R. 6508 to end our membership in NATO.
In his bill, Massie stated that NATO was created to counter the Soviet Union, which collapsed more than 30 years ago. Since then,
U.S. participation has cost taxpayers trillions of dollars and still carries the risk of dragging the United States into foreign wars.
This bill requires President Donald Trump to officially notify NATO of the withdrawal no later than 30 days after the law comes into effect. Additionally, the document states that the bloc's original Cold War-era purpose no longer aligns with the national interests of the United States. The bill establishes that the European members of NATO possess sufficient economic and military potential to ensure their own defense. And it prevents the use of American taxpayers' money to fund the organization's joint budgets. But to fully understand this statement from the Republican, you first need to know who Thomas Massie is.
This congressman is quite a peculiar and rather unusual representative indeed. He is, so to speak, a representative of the Republican Party community associated with the MAGA movement. In other words, he is largely an isolationist. He advocates for minimizing government interference in people's lives. And overall, he supports the idea that the United States should minimize its involvement in implementing any kind of foreign policy.
Political analyst Petro Oleszczuk is convinced that you can't say this opinion, and such a bold statement from Massie is mainstream in the United States.
However, in the context of the White House introducing a new version of the US foreign policy strategy, which has already sparked intense discussion not only in the US but also around the world, he is probably trying to somehow use this trend to implement his own vision for the future of the United States.
Reuters, citing sources, reports that last week a meeting took place in Washington between Pentagon officials overseeing NATO policy and several European delegations. During the negotiations, Washington did not announce any plans to leave the alliance. But it wants Europe to take on most of NATO's conventional defense capabilities, from intelligence to missiles. The deadline set by the Americans is 2027.
Shifting this burden from the US to the European members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization will fundamentally change how the United States, one of the founders of the post-war alliance, cooperates with its most important military partners.
Furthermore, according to media reports, at the meeting, Pentagon representatives noted that Washington is still not satisfied with the steps Europe has taken to strengthen its defense capabilities after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
With Trump's arrival, isolationist sentiments are growing stronger. The United States constantly declares that it is not particularly interested in defending Europe, that Europe should defend itself, and that their priorities lie in the Pacific region.
The media reports that American officials have told their colleagues that if Europe does not meet the requirements by 2027, the US may cease participating in certain NATO defense coordination mechanisms.
What is the peculiarity of this strategy? Although the strategy does not explicitly call for the United States to leave NATO, it is clear that the United States will reduce its participation in NATO programs and that Europeans should take responsibility themselves. First and foremost, they should defend themselves. Overall, the defense of Europe is no longer considered a particular problem for the United States.
At the same time, several European officials have stated that the 2027 deadline is unrealistic. Regardless of how Washington assesses the progress, Europe needs more than just money. It also needs the political will to replace certain US capabilities in the short term.
We have made it clear that it is necessary for Europeans to take the lead in the conventional defense of Europe. We are committed to working through NATO coordination mechanisms to strengthen the alliance and ensure its long-term viability, as European allies increasingly take responsibility for conventional deterrence and defense in Europe.
But in any case, one thing is clear: there are plenty of questions piling up for NATO. And the Americans themselves have made it clear that things will not be as they were before.
For now, Congress is not ready to vote for the United States to leave NATO. However, this is a certain indicator of the trends that are being observed in American politics. So probably for now the United States will not leave NATO, but the trend is that NATO is becoming an increasingly elusive structure. And the question will arise, will the United States really defend its NATO allies? So far, in the context of Trump's actions, all of this looks very, very strange.
Clever. Orban is looking for ways to hold on to power even if he loses the April elections. According to Bloomberg, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban is considering moving to the post of president. There is a high probability that Orban will lose the parliamentary elections given the united opposition. But he does not intend to give up power. All the details are coming up next.
Operation Eternal Power. 15 years as Prime Minister, but even that's not enough.
Our victory in the elections is so big that you can see it from the moon, and even more so from Brussels.
A political maneuver is being prepared in Hungary that increasingly resembles the Russian scenario. Viktor Orban is a contender for the role of the second Putin within the EU.
This is a very slippery thing, in my opinion. You can't say Orban can't, be completely pro-Russian. He has to be pro-Hungarian. And in fact, it's no coincidence that his ratings are dropping because right now he's too pro-Russian. And in this sense, when Orban completely falls under Moscow's influence, it could further fuel the engine of protests within the country.
The turning point will be the parliamentary elections in 2026. According to polls, Orban's party could lose for the first time in many years. And this is exactly where the plan to rewrite the constitution and take the president's seat comes in.
The reason, by and large, is just one. It's the desire to stay in power as long as possible. For what purpose? In order to steal as much money as possible. And in fact, simply keeping oneself in power is also enjoyable. It's quite possible that the new government will investigate those, I'm sure, the criminal offenses that he and his inner circle committed while in power.
In Hungary today, it's a parliamentary republic. Key decisions are made by the deputies and the government. But Orban wants to change the very model of power. He wants to strengthen the role of the president so that he becomes the central figure.
This is a matter for parliament alone. So I think Orban might try to do this. That's why I say the question. I have other questions. What will Brussels do in this situation, and what will the people do?
Orban has long been a political ally of Putin, so the question of whether there is any influence or support from Moscow in this process remains open.
What do you mean, might? It's not just that it might be involved, it's already fully involved in this scheme, because Orban can't behave like this otherwise. Unless he has a plan for where he'll get the money from. So, of course, there will inevitably be a significant flood of Russian money, and all sorts of influential Russian political strategists, propagandists, and other similar figures will certainly be deeply involved in these matters.
But what could this mean for Hungary itself?
For Hungary, this will mean a sharp escalation of internal contradictions and possibly the emergence of mass protests that could turn into a revolution. If the ratings are falling, it means that Orban's position is not interesting to Hungarians. If people in Hungary prefer a different stance and Orban wants to forcefully break everything and impose his will, well, this isn't Moscow, so to speak, and it's unlikely that Hungarians are ready to swallow all of this.
A separate topic is Budapest's relationship with Kyiv.
Ukraine is not an independent state. Ukraine is not a sovereign state. After all, you are not the ones holding Ukraine together. It is the West that is holding it together. We are giving Ukraine weapons. Ukraine should not behave like a sovereign country.
The strengthening of Orban's role could also affect Ukraine.
Of course, it will affect Ukraine, absolutely. Because the more Orban falls into the Kremlin's embrace, the worse it gets. Accordingly, he is already starting to promote the idea that, well, obviously, peace must be made at any cost. And that Ukraine should be divided. Orban will promote the Kremlin's narratives about dividing Ukraine. In my opinion, this is obvious.
This is not the first time Orban has raised the issue of expanding the president's role. Over his years in power, he has already revised the election rules. And on December 10th, the Hungarian parliament even approved a bill that will make it more difficult to remove the president from office in the future. However, at the same time, Orban's official representative called these reports fake.
As with the story about the Kremlin, we always trust our own eyes and ears. So, if we see that bills are already being pushed in parliament to make impeachment or something else more difficult for the president, and tomorrow there will be an increase in presidential powers, it's clear where this is heading. But again, we trust the ratings. We understand that Orban is most likely going to lose the spring elections, and that's why he's already trying to do something about it today.
On December 11th, the Office of the Prosecutor General of Ukraine submitted to court an indictment concerning the head of Chechnya, Ramzan Kadyrov. He is suspected of organizing the invasion of Ukraine and assisting the Russian regime in unleashing the war. In this report, we will share the details.
The Office of the Prosecutor General has officially submitted the case against the head of Chechnya, Ramzan Kadyrov, to court. The wording of the charges sounds extensive. Organization of the invasion, leadership of illegal armed groups, aiding an aggressive war, torture, cruel treatment of prisoners. The list is long and in its own way telling.
People of Ukraine, where are you looking? Come out and make your voice heard. According to the investigation, formations subordinate to Kadyrov, from National Guard units to the so-called Akhmat fighters, actively participated in the assaults on Ukrainian cities and in suppressing the resistance of the civilian population. Ukrainian prosecutors point out that these are systematic violations of the laws and customs of war. And it's not just about the fighting, but also about the infamous calling card of the Chechen units.
Videos about heroism, pre-edited in advance.
Hello there. We are
from Chechnya.
A separate point in the case is that Kadyrov gave his subordinates orders that contradicted all norms of international humanitarian law, including instructions not to take prisoners after a strike by the armed forces of Ukraine on a target. In Donbas, the investigation has also gathered evidence of Ukrainian prisoners of war being used as human shields, and this already sounds like a very specific criminal charge. However, while Kadyrov tries to remain silent in the legal field, he does the opposite in the information space. His Telegram channel has long turned into a stream of aggression where wars, threats, and curses follow one after another.
One immediately after another. When our country truly needs and calls upon us, yes. He is always steadfastly there, ready to answer the call. When the state or the president needs us, yes, he is there. Leave, yes. His shortcomings, yes, he is there. Keep them to yourself, yes, he is there. Today, a believer, a loving person, yes, he is. Someone who respects himself first and foremost, yes, himself, yes, he won't just sit at home. He'll find himself a rifle, he'll find everything he needs, yes, he will, and he'll go fight against these fiends, against this Satanism.
Meanwhile, the war has reached Chechnya itself. Ukrainian drones are striking targets linked to his structures more and more often. Footage of recent attacks has spread across the internet, such as in Donbas and other sites within the Republic. This is an unexpected turn for people who, for many years, considered their region an inviolable fortress.
An explosive morning for Kadyrov. Ukrainian drones broke through the much-vaunted defenses and struck directly at the elite Grozny city towers. It's symbolic that the offices of the Security Council and law enforcement were hit. This is already the second successful attack in a week. First the FSB, now the city center.
Kadyrov's reaction, as always, is loud, a promise of harsh retaliation. He spoke about fascist Ukraine, declaring that every strike on Chechnya would have fatal consequences. He even announced that he was ready to pay his fighters for every Ukrainian drone they shoot down.
You've probably all already heard that the Ukrainian shaitans destroyed the Chechen Republic, military infrastructure, wiped out equipment, the UAV factory, anything you can think of, but not a civilian target. I want to say that they did nothing. They only broke some windows. We will respond shamefully, brutally. Our targets will be only military facilities. And you will see just how untouchable the Chechen Republic and Russia as a whole are.
This public aggressiveness has long been part of his political image. Reactions like, "I'll show you, we'll respond, that was a mistake," come out weekly, sometimes even daily.
We have fought, we will keep fighting, and we will continue to destroy. I want to declare, to tell everyone who shares our joy and sorrow, that tomorrow morning, until the end of the week, we will be ruthless, merciless, and
all this is happening against the backdrop of constant discussions about his health, Kadyrov's. The internet is abuzz with rumors about his illnesses. Some talk about a serious diagnosis, others about severe flare-ups, and some about the speed at which
But however,
no matter how Kadyrov himself looks or how his videos appear, the court will deal with war crimes and with those who ordered them, supported them, filmed them, and posted them to social media set to music.
Meanwhile, in Putin's pseudo-empire, residents of the Sverdlovsk region are asking their Tsar father to relocate them to decent homes. They even dared to stage a protest. They described the details of life in their dilapidated building on posters. We have black mold, rats eat cats, syphilis, tuberculosis.
Hello, Vladimir Vladimirovich. We are residents of emergency and pre-emergency buildings. Living in Sverdlovsk region, city of Serov, we are reaching out to you with a cry from the heart and tears in our eyes.
On social media, footage is circulating of a woman in the video reading an appeal to Putin in a trembling voice. She says that not only the seriously ill and children, but also the families of SVO participants have to live in terrible conditions. Listen for yourselves.
We are not being heard in our city. The condition of the buildings is becoming unfit for living. Not because of the residents, but because of the inaction of the management companies, the supervisory authorities overseeing the management companies, and the administration of the city of Serov. It's the same inaction. Buildings are declared unsafe at lightning speed, but there's nowhere to relocate people. The temporary housing stock is simply in terrible condition. It's even dangerous to be there. Children with disabilities live in our buildings. Large families, pensioners, people with cancer and chronic illnesses. Families of participants in the special military operation. We are simply begging you to take our problem under your control.
I don't know about you, but I have just one question. Who bombed Russia's barracks? Come on, admit it. How do you like our news? Write to us about what we should change to become better. We will definitely take it into account. In the meantime, give this video a like to support what we're doing. And be sure to subscribe to our channel, Ukraine Today, so you don't miss the next episodes. See you